Hello DEVxDAO VAs. I'm really happy to finally give you our milestone 3. The link to the website you'll see in the grant submission. So this recording is the presentation about what we've achieved and what we've done. And I want to start out with why we're doing this. Why are we using this particular tool for the large luxury fashion market? And for those of you who know my background, I'm a diplomat, a former diplomat. I work in international development as well. I've worked on digital tools to help people in developing countries improve their situations. Why am I going to luxury fashion? Why does that fit? Why does it even make sense? Well, it's because one, this is where there's high value, where blockchain-based tools can help prevent the counterfeiting and can also be used to send tips to consumers, which we'll discuss later on, and to make sure there's fair value throughout the supply chain. But secondly, I want to onboard as many people as possible into the blockchain. And this tool, by addressing the fashion market, this is where there's a big need. So fashion companies have an interest in using a tool like this to prevent counterfeiting. At the same time, this tool will onboard millions into the blockchain. If every consumer who buys something from Gucci or from another major brand of Hermes, whichever, if every one of them is receiving a digital certificate, aka NFT, they now all are in the blockchain. They're using the system. They're part of the Web3 world. So this is a way we easily bring people into the Web3 world who were not part of it before. At the same time, one of our later steps will be creating digital wallets for all the workers throughout the supply chain. A lot more people in developing countries are actually getting into digital wallets than we see in the US or Europe so far. Maybe not a lot more in total numbers, but a significant percentage because of volatility with currency in their own countries. So people are creating wallets. We see cases like El Salvador ahead of everybody else of having Bitcoin as legal tender even. So I see getting these workers that are in the garment supply chains and later on other supply chains into the blockchain, into the Web3 world, having their own digital IDs, having their own wallets. This is a way we can bring them into this as well. Later on, once they have their wallets and they can receive, say, tips from consumers, we're transparently seeing who's worked on what project, who's helped assemble your sweater, your clothing item you're wearing. Yeah, they can also start using these same wallets for remittances, for payments, for savings. Personally, I'm really worried about looking at the US budget deficit right now, about the dollar collapsing. I want people in other countries throughout the world, both the US and everyone will be impacted by a collapse of the dollar, to have something else, to be into the Web3 world and to be able to hedge themselves of not having just fiat currency, but having Casper or having other tokens. And obviously we're building on Casper, and we're doing this because this is the best to integrate with supply chains. Casper's abilities to integrate with enterprise supply chains are simply better than what we see others making, and so that's why we picked it, and that's why we're here with the DEVxDAO building this. And so along with that, I'm going to go into the next slides of why more on this. Again, myself, you know my name, Peter Johnson. Here's my email address, my Telegram information, my phone number, which you can use for WhatsApp as well. Always available for questions if you guys need to reach out to me. Why the fashion industry? Okay, I've talked a bit about that already, of how that onboards so many people, but there's additional reasons. The European economy, so just Europe, not even looking at other big fashion producers, they lost $26.3 billion of revenue and more than 500,000 direct and indirect jobs due to counterfeiting. And they also, due to the counterfeiting and the money they lose, they don't have the ability to pay upstream producers as fairly. Now, yes, I can't guarantee if we eliminate counterfeits that they actually will pay their upstream producers more fairly. However, if they have less losses, if there's less counterfeiting, there's the ability at least. As well, the traceability that we bring to the supply chain, this will make it where it's transparent if they're not paying people fairly. And at that later stage, we don't send tips to workers, something we didn't talk about when we first proposed this, but that we'd look to have in a future grant proposal. This is something that can be added. Again, I know the DEVxDAO is winding down, so our future grant proposals may be going somewhere else or trying to raise money somewhere else. But these future steps I'll still talk about in this sense. And again, fashion is a large and complex and old supply chain with so many inefficiencies, so many inequalities. So that's why there's simply more need in this space. A head of a large investment company recently asked me if we were interested in the white goods sector. like appliances, like home appliance, dishwashers, laundry machines, things like that. Yes, this product, the way we've built it, could be used for that, but that supply chain, automotive supply chains, they're not as messy. They don't have as many problems. They don't have as much need for improvement as the textile supply chain does, as the garment supply chain does. So although our tool can be adapted for other supply chains as well, textiles and garments, this is a supply chain space where there's just so many more messes, so many more inefficiencies, and so much more space to create transparency and to create improvements, because they're lacking so much more in transparency than other sectors. Again, the luxury fashion market, it's estimated to be a value of US $91 billion in 2022, and that this year it should reach $103 billion. This is even with the economic slowdown, and expectations are that this market would grow to $278 billion by 2031. So we anticipate getting our product launched quickly, having it ready for market by later this year. If we capture even 1% of this market, consider a $91 billion market. And let's say if we get 1% of that market, that's massive. I'm going to talk you through another example that goes more specific, though, how this works, how we make money from this, and that's coming up in just a couple more slides. The other things that differentiate us from other products in this space, the idea of composable NFTs, which I'll explain in a bit more detail, of basically having digital certificates or NFTs that track the raw materials and track what raw materials went into that finished product. So if I'm talking about a sweater and it has buttons on it, where did the plastic for the buttons come from? Where did the cotton come from? Where did the dye for the colors of the sweater come from? We're going to track everything and compose that into one single NFT. Additionally, when goods are resold, this is something that, since it's an NFT, or again, as we'll call it, digital certificate, since people don't seem to like using the phrase NFT anymore, these digital certificates, when they're resold, are built based on smart contracts, and we as the token issuers, as well as the original producers, will get value every time that's resold. We'll have a small commission that will agree when we mint the initial contract, and so we'll have recurring revenues. So again, a lot of these luxury goods are then resold in secondhand markets, and we'll have recurring revenues through that. So these are things we've talked about before, but I'll move on now. Again, our value proposition is that by creating a digital certificate at each fashion item, you have a digital ID, you can verify that this thing's accurate, you verify it's not a knockoff, it's not an imitation item, and we also create value when these items get resold. If someone's using the digital version of this item as an avatar in a game, that could be a potential in the future too. But mainly upstream companies, they're going to have data. They're going to see how their products were used. They're going to see what information is going on up and down the supply chain, so companies can make better decisions. So aside from what I've talked about so far, the data that's collected may actually end up being even more valuable than this counterfeiting aspect we've talked about that we've focused on initially. Again, the consumer to producer linkages, this is that aspect of, you know who made your sweater, who made your clothing item. Do you want to send him or her a tip? You can. This won't happen in milestone 1, 2, or 3. It's not part of our original architecture. We've talked about it. We planned how it could work in milestone 2 and discussed it. But if we say in terms of milestones, the tipping component would say be milestone 10. So that's coming down the road. It's part of our plan. You'll see when I go through our roadmap that's planned, I believe, for November of this year. But it is something coming. What are the other companies doing in this space? Well, this is what validates us. When I first proposed this idea, when I first brought this idea to the DEVxDAO, it was a new idea. It was inspired by a paper that the two doctors in El-Masiri had written together, that they had co-authored, about copycats in the garment supply chain. However, since that time, Amazon has moved into this space. Amazon has said that in April it was going to launch an NFT marketplace. I don't think it's actually live yet, but they announced it back in March. It's certainly moving. Their idea was they were going to do the same thing. They were going to have fashion items that were tracked with NFTs tied to them. They were going to make it even easier and simpler, because if you already have an Amazon account, all you're going to do is buy that clothing item, and Amazon will then create a digital wallet for you and put that digital certificate into your wallet. So you're not creating a separate account. You're not creating a separate wallet. You don't need to know anything about how blockchain works or how Web3 works. Amazon is doing this in the back end, very similar to what Reddit did with the tokens that Reddit has been selling. And so this is something where the fact that Amazon is moving into this at first scared me a lot, saying, oh, we're too late. We moved too slow. We didn't build this fast enough. On the other hand, it validates our idea. And there's a lot of people who don't want to ever be on Amazon. And to be honest, watching what's going on with artificial intelligence, with AI chatbots and new online shopping tools, who knows? Will Amazon still be something in 2 or 3 years? Or will we just buy things directly from producers? In which case, a tool like this could be useful as well. Again, Prada, Nike, Gucci, others are moving into this space as well. Prada has gotten to this with a very limited edition, but limited edition gender neutral sweater that includes an NFT, and the NFT is gifted to you when you buy their sweater. That's more or less following the same model as what we're doing. Nike has bought a metaverse studio, and they're making digital clothing items that are actually only a digital version of the item. It's not tied to your physical shoe, but it's rather, okay, you can't afford to buy Air Jordans yourself, but you can buy a digital pair of Air Jordans for $30, and you can have your avatar wear the digital Air Jordans at least. And so it's not the same as what we're doing, but Nike is very clearly actively moving into this space too. And these are just a couple of examples of the many companies already going into this space. But the Amazon example is really what I feel validates what we've discussed, what we've planned. But again, with our aspect of sending tips down the road, of having the full transparency, this is where we add value beyond what Amazon is doing of verifying there's no counterfeit. Again, we can do this with other spaces. We could go into the white goods space. We could go to the automotive space. Anything where there's many components. We want to track the raw materials and see how they're being put together. But this is something where we view garments as being the space where we can most quickly make an impact and reach tens of millions of people, bringing them into the Web3 space. How do we make money on this? Let's look at the example of Gucci. Now let's say right now globally there's 2 billion t-shirts produced annually. And these range from low-end t-shirts that you might buy for $5, $6 to like high-end t-shirts, like Gucci t-shirts that are like $600 each. What if we get a tiny share of that t-shirt market? And what if on each one of those, we're going to have a 1% or even a 0.5% minting fee? Imagine the size of that and say, 2 billion t-shirts, let's say between the $5 t-shirts and the $600 Gucci t-shirts, let's say an average of $10 t-shirts, we make 1% and we get 1% of this 2 billion t-shirt market. That can be massive. And obviously other clothing items, other fashion items will be part of what we do too. And what have we done? What have we made so far? You all have reviewed and voted upon milestones 1 and 2, so you have a pretty good idea what we've done so far. I'll review that quickly. And I think we've surpassed the requirements of what we've given you in milestone 1 and 2 as well. In milestone 1, we gave you the governance structure of the Garment Chain DAO, of how that would work. And we've made improvements from that. Based on feedback we had from VAs after voting in that first round, we've improved milestone 1. If you see, go back and look at that again, you'll see it's different than what you initially voted on, with new additions to it. And I'll explain in more detail how the voting of the DAO will work in a moment. In addition, in milestone 2, we've surpassed what was planned. Instead of only creating the code and the basic structure of what these NFTs would look like, we came up with this concept of both composable NFTs, of having different NFTs for the raw materials and how they are composed together to make a final NFT. And we've written the code. We have the smart contracts there. So the smart contracts are ready to go. They're written for these items. And we've outlined the next steps of this architecture of having physical backed tokens. This could be something where we don't have a QR code or something you scan on the NFT or on the item to see the NFT and its history, but rather where we have a microchip inside the item and you scan the actual item. And there's other companies who build this, like Kazumi with skateboard. The golden skateboards has been one example. Again, within milestone 2, we give some more examples of that. If you want to go to GitHub, there's more details there about this. And of course, the code is ready for a lot of this, and we have letters of intent from some of the early designers that will start with us. But again, we want to expand. We want to get bigger than that. So in details, milestone 1, DAO governance. So the DAO members will follow a hybrid model. We'll have those who are invited to join, people who are experts, people who've been selected and voted in, similar to the DEVxDAO model. Similar to the MVPR model of the DEVxDAO, you can stake your reputation. You can vote and win or lose reputation, depending on the side of the vote that you're on. And so that will be similar to what we're doing with the DEVxDAO as well. despite the fact that DEVxDAO is fading away, I think that was one of the most valuable parts of your model, and I really love that, and I want to make sure we use that. Now, the votes can also be held based on the NFTs held. So let's say I buy a Gucci shirt. I've got 1 vote. Or maybe we make that vote proportionate to the initial value of that shirt when I first buy it. But either way, my ownership of a digital certificate gives me voting rights because I've bought some of your clothing items. However, Gucci, if they're using this system, would have innumerably more votes because they own all the shirts sitting in their warehouse or all the shirts in their factories. And when they sell those, the retailers that are buying those shirts from them will obtain those votes, and they'll hold those votes until they sell the goods. And then the factory is making more, the company has more votes, they sell those onward, the retailers again have gain those votes as they sell the goods to consumers who then gain votes. So all of a sudden there's this connection where individual consumers, the factories upstream in your supply chain, the big fashion houses, as owners of tokens, they have voting rights, as owners of NFTs within the system, I should say, and they all have voting rights, and we have a community, we have a way that feedback can happen, and a connection on voting on standards and directions for the fashion industry can take place that includes consumers, that includes upstream factories, that includes the fashion houses themselves. So this is a way we can tie the industry together. However, despite the fact that this is milestone 1, the building of this is something we actually want to put later in our system. And we want to focus on getting the NFTs up and going first and getting this into practice, into use, and then doing that with a small group of participants at the beginning, and then adding to this DAO governance structure and giving voting rights at a slightly later stage. Again, so going on milestone 2 about how this NFT system works, we're tracking each raw materials information. Once those different digital certificates or those NFTs come together, we'll use that to make a composable NFT or a final product NFT that has the data from each of these goods, of each of these items. So that final product NFT, if it's a shirt, it's going to have what's the origin of the dye that was used to color the shirt, where did this cotton come from, where did the thread sewing here come from. We'll track that all, and you'll scan that final product NFT, and you'll be able to see the roots of where the cotton came from, where the dye came from, where the thread came from, how it was processed, who worked on it, all that will be available. Again, this is something we've written the composable code or the smart contracts for these composable NFTs already. Step 3, this is when things are shipped. Someone's scanning it, it's going out, it's in transit, and that final product, that's all being recorded in the blockchain. And finally, the consumer, they can scan that QR code on a product and they can see the whole history. Again, at a later stage, we want to make this where there will be no longer a QR code on the product, but rather that the physical backed token is something where you just point your phone, you point your smartphone at that shirt, and there's a microchip or there's something inside of it that you can already see the origin without any QR code being printed. There are some t-shirts already being made with this technology, so yes, there are microchips that can go through the laundry and not be ruined. That exists already. So that's something where it's a matter for us to figure out who the best partners are. DEVxDAO is one of the leading companies in this space. From the voting associates, Dr. Adela Masiri has had some contact with DEVxDAO, and he's been an advisor for us throughout this project. So he'll be able to help us connect with DEVxDAO or some other competitors as we decide who to move forward with once we reach that stage. Again, that's one of our later stages of development. And then, as the NFT holders, as someone buys that shirt, buys that item, they'll become a member of the DAO as well and have voting rights proportionate to the fashion items they've purchased and the NFTs they hold that came with those fashion items. So what did we implement? Sorry if I'm getting repetitive, but the composable NFTs, we've got that, we've got the smart contracts for that. Now we need to go out there and start implementing this and using it. We've written the code, we've got it ready to go, we've created the architecture that we said we would make for this. Next, we need to actually go out and do that. Physical backed tokens, again, we've outlined how it would work. We know that DEVxDAO and others who are the partners that we could work with this, but that's a later stage of writing the code of how we integrate our system with these physical chips that would go inside the clothing items. And so that's a later stage we'll be seeking funding for as well. Tipping your garment worker, that's coming down the road towards the end of this calendar year. Again, we'll have digital IDs for each of these workers. They'll have a digital ID because they're entering data into the system. So next, we want to figure out how we can, well, simply we want to make it so you can send them Casper tokens, or at a later stage, if there's a stable coin we can send them, that might be a good function as well. Again, for more detail, this is all in GitHub as well. Which chart companies? Here's some examples. You've seen this before. We've got contacts with all these firms already. Who do we have signed letters of intent with? Scarabæus Sakura, Aburi, Afro Fashion. These are all selling in Western European markets, but with mainly the production throughout Africa. Aburi also has production in Asia and Latin America. And Keytech, they approached us for almost completely different thing about tracing timber and cattle in Brazil. What funding do we have so far? We've got the funding you gentlemen have given us, and we've got funding as well that comes from Stellar that built our initial early system, the precursor to this, the IATI track system. And that's my earlier experience, which I've ran several pilots with, some with the textile sector, but more with the food sector. Roadmap, again, going forward, build a pilot of the composable NFT system. We've got the smart contracts written. We'd be building this pilot. August 2023, we'd then test the composable NFTs with partners, invite the early supporters to establish the Garment Chain DAO. We wouldn't necessarily go to scale of having a huge amount of partners yet or having all the NFT holders vote yet. It'd be a small group of people that would form the legal entity to start with. September, a public launch event, start moving beyond pilots, start onboarding bigger and more companies. October 2023, we'd look at adding that function to the physical backed tokens that I've discussed. December 2023, adding in wallets. We have digital IDs by that point for all the workers in the system. Now let's add the wallets so you can send tips to them. Throughout this time period, we'll be looking for additional partnerships. We'll be looking especially to work with certification associations. We'll be looking for investors. We'll also be looking at how we can best help people trace the data that's necessary to meet European environmental and sustainability standards. There's new rules, especially driven by Germany, that create requirements of what data you have to show, like your carbon offsets, or you've met certain human rights and labor standards in order to send goods into the European markets. These are adapting and evolving. They don't have to be in the blockchain. They don't even all have to be digital, but this can be a great tool to help companies meet these standards, especially as they get tougher and as they evolve more. Finally, a future step is looking at the decomposability of these products. We want to plan a future where, let's say, I'm going to recycle this shirt now. Now I want to track with a new NFT decomposing the components. Okay, this shirt's a bad example because there's no buttons, but what if I had a shirt with buttons and the buttons got recycled in one direction, the cotton got recycled in another direction, and now I could track that the inputs for the new clothing items I made of where those recycled components came from. In a future where we're looking to have a more environmentally friendly world, this can be a huge game changer, and especially if you as a producer can verify to your consumers that, hey, I didn't have new cotton picked for this. This is recycled cotton. These are recycled buttons. This is a completely environmentally friendly clothing item. Next steps, we need funding to keep building up our team to focus on fully building this system and implementing it. So those next steps you saw on our roadmap, those are things we'll need funding to build. And as well, we've outlined what we want to build and create some of the code, but we want to implement it. So again, building this, implementing it, we'll need to seek funding for that. I have realized that I personally love the ideas, love the concept, love reaching out and talking about this, but the back office of being with the chief operating officer, being the accountant, driving that, making sure we do fundraising, that we have clear financial projections, despite having a master's of international finance, that's not my forte. So I really want to find somebody to bring on board who can work with us on the fundraising side of this and making our financial projections and helping on the operations side. My idea would be, I would love to be the chief visionary officer. Yeah, still yes, maybe CEO or maybe somebody else even as the CEO, but be the one who brings this vision out there, who spreads this word, who gets this out to the masses, gets this out to as many companies and consumers as possible. We have other partners and team members who are fantastic at building the things that we've talked about, who've made the smart contracts and the code we have so far. But one of the key next steps we'll need is to find somebody who can help us on the operations and the fundraising side of it. And that will be a key aspect to helping us meet the milestones, or the next milestones, specifically those items that are listed in our roadmap. So thank you very much. I know this is a recording, so I won't take live questions from you, but please send me questions on Telegram, send me questions in Discourse, wherever it suits you best. I really want to answer your questions and make sure we can close out this grant. This is milestone 3, it's the end of the grant. And I know the DEVxDAO is winding down, but very much like to stay in contact with any of you interested in this product or with this project. If you want to be involved, if you know other places where I should bring this for funding or helping keep expand this, please let me know. I would love to keep working with you. It's really been a pleasure to meet all of you and to get feedback, especially those who've given me critical feedback, because that's something I've been able to learn from. So I hope we can wind down this milestone 3, work together in the winding down of the DEVxDAO, and figure out what our next steps are and how we can keep working together. Because even if the DAO itself is winding down, I don't want to lose contact with all of you, and I want to see how we can help bring Web3 to the masses. Thank you all.